Over the course of this season, which is nearly reaching 50 episodes now, we've done two things. We've stormed through Steven Soderbergh's filmography, one film at a time, and we've reviewed new movies playing in theaters. Today, we get to perfect our form.
It's the You Put Your Chocolate in My Peanut Butter episode of The Filmographers. we went to the movies to see a new Soderbergh film, Presence, which releases this Friday.
Yes, we did it. We did it, Keir. We saw a Soderbergh movie in the theaters. It was fantastic. Though, in a way, it's hard to call Presence a new movie because technically it premiered over a year ago at the Sundance Film Festival. Now, granted, a movie premiering at a film festival and not seeing a wide release of any sort isn't abnormal. Movies oftentimes play at festivals generally in the hopes of accomplishing two things: building audience hype and finding distribution partners.
The bigger the hype, the more lucrative the distribution deal the producers can leverage.
And Presence curried very strong reactions when it played at Park City last January. So strong that reports indicate that there were 10 bidders for the film, with Neon emerging as the victor.
It's so cool to see Soderbergh still making waves at Sundance this late in his career. Way back in our first episode, we discussed how he not only premiered his debut film, Sex, Lies, and Videotape, at Sundance, but he won the Audience Award and paved the way for American independent cinema for a decade to come. At that point, Sundance was still known as the U.S. Film Festival and wouldn't be called Sundance until 1991, 2 years after Sex, Lies, but trust us, it was Sundance. Now, Soderbergh's relationship with the festival has been rocky at times. After being its poster child for a few years, he distanced himself after falling out with festival founder Robert Redford, who yanked the movie Quiz Show out from under him, and then withdrew much of his support for King of the Hill, Soderbergh's third feature.
But here Soderbergh is again, 35 years later, making more major waves at the film festival that helped kickstart his career. We're not going to get too deep into this. We'll save that for our proper deep dive into Presence when we get there in Soderbergh's filmography. But the movie was very well received when it played last year. Vulture called it one of his best movies in ages, which personally I think is bullshit. He's had plenty of great movies recently. And it's always weird when someone says ages. It's like, what is that? Ages, if you actually, age is a long time. But anyway,
ages or dog years or elephant years,
scores, 4 scores. I don't know, but anyway, got good reviews despite bad wording. And there were reports, in addition to the good reviews, there were reports that I find is really interesting of people having to leave the theater because the movie was that intense. Now, Keir, you and I saw it together, so I know Presence didn't force you out of the theater. It didn't force me out either. We were together the entire time. But before we share our thoughts on Presence, I want to say thank you to everyone for joining us. If you're watching on YouTube, give us a subscribe and a like. Share the show with your film-loving friends. Drop your comments below too. We love that. I love hearing the comments from people. It just makes it so much fun and engaging. And we had some great discussions last time on our Nosferatu video. Epic-tastic Joshua had some really nice thoughts, and John King shared some historical insight that actually, to be honest, I didn't know about. So if you're on YouTube, leave those comments. We'll respond. We'll have a nice little discussion. It's a good time. It's what we're here for with the movies, is to share, engage, and discuss. If you're listening on a podcast, basically the same thing. Give us a subscribe, leave us a rating or review, and drop us a line if you want. We are the Filmographers Podcast at gmail.com. That is where you can find us. Send us a note. We'll read it on air. We'll respond back to you. We love that kind of stuff. Now, housekeeping out of the way. Keir, now that we've seen Presence a little ahead of time, which is awesome, but tell us what you thought of it.
Well, actually, I just thought of one more piece of housekeeping, which is that I want to say up front that we are not going to spoil plot developments in this movie. We will share the premise and some of the circumstances of the film. So if you don't like knowing anything about the film, I don't know what you're doing here, but come back and watch this video later. When we talk about Soderbergh, we definitely do spoilers because those films, the historical films we've discussed, they've been out for a while. You've all had a chance to see them. We're going to really do our best to steer clear of anything resembling a spoiler in our discussion of Presence today. That said, I really, really, really enjoyed this film, Mike. It's so funny because I feel like it's like, as we alluded to in the introduction, it's pretty wild. We've been talking about Soderbergh going back to the very beginning of his career. We've been studying him like he's this historical artifact. Obviously, we know he's still making movies, but yeah, finally, the space-time continuum met up and we got to actually go see something live. Obviously, we've been looking forward to Presence for a long time because it's been completed for a long, long time. In some ways, I didn't know what to expect because as much as we study Soderbergh, I did kind of consciously avoid reading any of the online chatter about this film because I'd love to walk into a movie cold as much as possible. And I obviously watched the trailer, but I didn't obsessively watch the trailer. I watched it a couple of times. And we had a nice conversation with our buddy Sylvan to talk about the movie before it came out, so we knew a little bit about that. I had referred to it in that conversation as a horror film. It definitely felt from the trailer like it was going to be more in the horror world. He called it a ghost story. It's kind of all of those things, right? It's horror, it's a ghost story, it's a suspense, it's a family drama. It was a movie that just kept me involved throughout. It was spooky as hell, but it was also involving at a character level. This it centers around, for those who don't know, the title refers to it. It's a presence. It's a ghost story. It's told from the point of view of the ghost. It's about this family who moves into a house where there's a ghost, and the only things we get to know about this family are told through the ghost's point of view, which is a big choice, right? I mean, I think one of the things I said when we were walking out was that it feels like such a kind of high concept premise that you could imagine a beginning indie filmmaker doing it and it being a fine movie, like an okay movie. But here we have a guy like Soderbergh who's at the height of his powers doing it, and it's great. It's really, really effective. I've got a lot more to say, but I don't want to monologue. Mike, what did you think of Presence?
I mean, we both walked out of it feeling very positive about the movie. We were both very enthusiastic about the execution of the idea. You know, it's funny, and I certainly fall into this trap as well of trying to put movies and put anything into a bucket, to categorize them and say, well, this is a horror movie and this is a suspense and this is a romance or whatever the case may be. And we talked to Chris Sullivan a bit about that because everything we had heard was that it was a horror movie. And then we came to discover from him that it kind of is and kind of isn't. And I don't want to dispel what it is, but it definitely, there's another movie that's literally called A Ghost Story that David Lowery made. Do you remember that one with Casey Affleck from a few years ago?
Yeah.
That was, I guess, similar. I guess the most similar thing I can find to Presence, that was more about a, visceral journey of loss and moving on and things like that, which is, it was a wonderful movie. I love David Lowery. But Presence is sort of doing something similar. Like, this isn't like, it's not a James Wan movie. It's not a Blumhouse movie. And I don't mean that in a bad way because I like those movies. But like, I hope that's the one thing I wish coming away from this podcast without spoiling anything. My one concern is that I feel like it's being a little bit hyped as a horror movie, and the whole thing of people walking out because it's so intense. I don't want people to, I think that there was a mistake as well. Sort of with Longlegs that was so hyped as being so scary that like I don't want people to go in and say, oh, well, it wasn't that scary, because Presence isn't trying to be scary. And I'm not being critical of marketing. You have to find a way to market movies, and if people did walk out, indeed, and I have no reason to believe that they didn't, that like, yeah, it's cool to lean into that. But like, I hope people, it's not about the marketing as much as it is about keeping an open mind. And that's what I'm talking about, how we all have our penchant for categorizing things and wrapping our arms around them and calling them this and calling them that and distinguishing them in those terms. Keep an open mind for what this movie is rather than expecting it to be something, because if you approach it on the terms that it's presenting, it is such an excellent interesting, unique movie that I thoroughly enjoyed. We both did, and for the reasons that we've already started to state, it's just so interesting that Soderbergh made this choice to film it this way from the ghost POV, and to create some interesting rules about the ghost that you learn in the movie. And the technical exercise alone is so bold and so audacious, and it's so cool that like Soderbergh can be 30 plus movies into his career, 30 plus years into his career, and still taking these swings and still finding ways to make it work. It's a tight, like Kimmy, funny enough, I guess 89 minutes is the new 120 minutes in Soderbergh's world. It's tight as can be. It zips by in the best possible way. It keeps you engaged, interested, curious, very much impressed by what's happening just on a technical level. And by the end, you kind of exhale, and it's just like, wow, that was I love those movies that are like, I just haven't seen anything like this. This so impressed me. It was so different, and I'm just glad for the experience of it.
Yeah, it's funny, in a year that gave us some very long movies, and in the past few years there have been some extremely long movies, and I've got nothing against long movies, but if you can get it done quickly, do it quickly. I think it's a refreshing antidote to some of the bloviating, overstuffed megalopolis movies of the last year. And in some ways, it seems like a perfect Soderbergh movie, because you mentioned rules. There's some kind of rules for the ghost. Soderbergh's a guy, as we know, who loves to set rules for production or camera work, or he likes to create restrictions. We talked about that over the course of the season. That can be a great way to make art, is to set some constraints on yourself. And if that's Soderbergh's way into a ghost story, then perfect. I think he really nailed it. I feel like marketing people are probably constitutionally incapable of not using a hook. Like, people walked out of this because, it's just, they're looking for any kind of an angle. So, but yeah, as you say, this is not like, when The Exorcist came out, they were leaning into like, people were throwing up, people were, like had to run out to the lobby, all this kind of stuff. You think about like producers like William Castle saying, oh, there's a coward's corner for people who are too afraid, This is not that at all. But I also don't want to underplay the creepiness or scariness too much, because, and this is a more subtle pleasure than being like freaked out or a big jump scare or something like that. But there was one moment at the end of the film, the very end of the film, where I had a full body shiver. I shivered in a way that I have never at any other film. Like, it was a creepy feeling, or just like this kind of shock of recognition and a chill that was really unique, and an in the moment visceral reaction that was really unforgettable to me. So I will say it does deliver something on that level. It's a spooky movie.
I agree. Yeah, the climax of the movie is scary, very scary, very uncomfortable, very intense. So yeah, I agree with you. I don't want to make it seem like there's no chills, because even throughout there's chills. There's some like just uncomfortable moments, heightened by the discomfort around the family in general. And I want to say also kudos to David Koepp's script. David Koepp, I guess this is no, this is not quite back to back with. It feels back to back because we just did we recorded our episode on Kimmy. But David Koepp had written Kimmy for Soderbergh. They're longtime friends. David Koepp has written numerous scripts, successful, amazing scripts. Panic Room, Jurassic Park. He's written some novels.
Yeah, he's one of the best in the business.
One of the best. Consummate pro, and it's remarkable for him. We're tipping our hats to Soderbergh at the technical prowess that he showed, and the daring that he showed with. I mean, he was the ghost. He plays the ghost basically as the camera strapped to his body. He's moving through the house. Everything that the ghost is doing, he's doing, because he's operating the camera. But David Koepp's script is very interesting. Like, I love, in this typical type of movie of what you'd expect, you expect there's these movies, and I know what you mean, and sometimes I know you know what I mean, that sometimes I wonder, like, what do these people, I always want to make a movie where, like, what do the people do? Like, say if we're talking about like Manhunter, the Michael Mann movie, like what does Dennis Farina do when he's not working on this case? You know, like like a movie that follows him, like all the scenes in between, you know, because it's like inconsistent. And I'm not, Manhunter is one of my favorite movies. I'm not trying to take anything away from it, but it's like inconceivable. And I feel like that they're doing anything is inconceivable. And I feel like Presence is like the opposite. Like it's actually capturing all those moments like that are seemingly innocuous, that like it's just the family living and having a dinner, and sometimes they talk about the presents and sometimes they don't, and sometimes they're talking about things that are salient to the movie that you think are salient that maybe not be where you think it's going. Like they have very naturalistic conversations, and he's not afraid to go to those places, and he's not afraid to not resolve things in a way you think they would be resolved. Like it's a really bold and interesting script as well. And it just adds another layer of how just well executed this is. And it's such a cool thing to look at, because you're like, wow, not only is this so well done and so well done, it's just so well done and so well done in such a short amount of time, the 89 minutes, and every layer of it is really firing. And we should talk about the cast as well, who I thought were all remarkably terrific. Like I thought they all did a great job. Sullivan, we give a lot of love to Sullivan, but everybody who was involved in the film did a fantastic job. Some of them, this is some of their first work, and I think that they were all terrific.
Yeah, so we have Lucy Liu as Rebecca Payne. She's the mom and the wife. Chris Sullivan as Chris Payne. Always nice for an actor, I'm sure, when their first name aligns with their character name. Make sure you remember your lines. Kalina Lang as Chloe, their daughter, and Eddie Madday as Tyler, the son. We have Julia Fox with a small role as a realtor, and West Mulholland in a very striking role as Ryan, who's a new friend of Tyler, who plays in a growing role in the movie. It is, great performances throughout. Very interesting family dynamics. I think the family dynamics are so powerful because it's a dysfunctional family in a big, big way. We've got a mom who's chosen a favorite kid. We've got a dad who's trying to be the nice guy and kind of bridge conflict, but he's kind of got a favorite kid too. There's some tensions in the family that are voiced but not fully explained, because again, we see what the ghost sees. We see little bits and pieces. It's almost like one of those plays that kind of goes to blackout, like between scenes or monologues or something. It's very fragmented, and yet it does create a full picture. But because we don't have an omniscient narrator, we have this limited narrator in this ghost who comes and goes. We only see bits and pieces. It's certainly enough. And I like the way that not everything was resolved. We understand some of the major stresses on the relationship, and we see some interesting, some tantalizing avenues that the story might have gone or could go in the future based on phone calls or conversations the characters have. But I loved it. I just absolutely loved it. And I think that the fact that the family was so messy added this whole level of anxiety to me, but it also showed how much more vulnerable they are to this external, well, internal, because it's in the house, but this other stress on the relationship of the family. And the fact that the family feels very real and very messy made the scary stuff scarier to me. It just, again, that moment of chills, the shiver that I got at the very end of the movie is because they've created such a real world, and then it's this suggestion that when the supernatural enters into what is very a real world. I mean, that isn't that the goal of any kind of ghost story or any movie that wants to scare you, a horror film that wants to scare you with more than just splatter and jump scares, is to convince you that this stuff is real. And that's why it's scary, because it's what if this thing entered into your real life, and that's where the real chills lie.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with that. And we talked about this a little bit in the No Sudden Move episode where we said there's a difference between capturing something and depicting something. And capturing is a much richer experience because it feels like you're just finding something real and putting it into existence. You're capturing a feeling, a moment, a time, whatever it is. Depicting feels like a step away, like you're trying to, it's like a simulation of the thing, and presence really captures a family, I think, remarkably well. And you're right, it adds to the tension, it adds to the anxiety, and it just adds to what feels very real about it, despite there being a supernatural thing. I think that's part of what really drew me to it, is that it feels authentic and it feels real. Like I said, you can't, you look at Insidious, or one of those movies, that like you can't see these characters existing beyond being worried about what's happening in Insidious, the movie, where you can see the characters and
Yeah.
presence existing outside of what's happening in presence. And you're right. I mean, that's what makes the best, ghost stories, horror films, anything like that, gives them power, especially ghost stories. As ghost stories is just like, there's often just this echo of life, of like what life means once it's been removed, and where do we go, and how do we think about our loved ones who are gone, and how do their presence stay with us, and so on and so forth. Or even if they're not our loved ones, how does I don't want to sound like new agey, but like the energy of the world, like how does it still kind of stay tethered to our world in memory, and sometimes act like in this movie, actual presence. And it just brings it to this really powerful and an emotional conclusion, I felt like. And I don't think you can get to that place without, one, capturing the authenticity of the family, and two, treating the ghost as something more than just a vehicle for jump scares and for spookiness. It actually has a visceral, emotional component to it as well. And Presence does that so well. And again, I just can't believe it. They did it in such a small amount of time.
Yeah, and that's a great callback to No Sudden Move, because for that they were really thinking about like what's it like to tell this story from inside this time or inside this story. And boy, Soderbergh really found a way to do that here, because the ghost is inside the house. The ghost often retreats to this closet. We're in the room. We're in the house. He's giving us the point of view of a character. He's playing a character, as you said, that's inside these people's world, even though they're not really sure. They're not aware of it to begin with. Then they're gradually more aware of it. Then they're not completely sure who this is. And I'm not going to go into this because this is a no spoilers episode, but there's a lot we could discuss about who is the ghost. And
Yeah. I was surprised. We walked away with two different interpretations.
yeah. And I love that, because it's the kind of movie that you can talk about, for the rest of the evening. Go see this movie, go have a drink with your friends, go have dinner, get on your phone and text about it later. I think that it's a film that's going to be a great one to talk about for as long as, for longer than the runtime of the film.
Yeah, and that's the thing that's probably my final parting thought, is that this movie, because of what it is and the way it was made and what it presents and where it goes, is meant to be experienced on the big screen, I would argue. I think that look, you can see at home. It's not gonna work, but it is an experience. So not all movies are experiences. I think, like, it's funny to compare the two, but like Avatar, the James Cameron film, is an experience. Like, you go to the theater for this specific big theatrical experience that doesn't quite work as well when you are at home, no matter how big your screen is. And I think Presence, despite being infinitely smaller than Avatar, I think that Presence also is a theatrical experience because of the craft of the filmmaking, because of what how the movie was made and how it plays. Like, it is absolutely meant to be, you go to the theater, you shut off your phones, you shut off your device, everything. You go, you watch it, the movie is an experience to be had. And at the end, like you said, you can go and discuss it with people, but just have that 89-minute experience. It's a powerful one. It's a great one. I loved it. I'm going to see it again because I want to. It's not as much that I want to see it again. I want to experience it again.
Absolutely. Yeah, we say this all the time, go see the movies in the theaters, but this one especially so. We talked recently about how Soderbergh claims that he does not approach the filming of a movie differently, whether it's going to be on the big screen or the small screen. We're not 100% sure if that's true, but that's what he says. We also have talked about recently how Soderbergh is coming off a run of really great movies that didn't maybe get the attention that they should have because they went straight to streaming. As good as, Kimi was, if it had been a theatrical film and not an HBO film, would it have done better? Now we get a chance to find out. Soderbergh has made a movie that definitely plays better on the big screen. I haven't seen it on the little screen, but I can just tell you it does. It will. Hopefully it'll be in theaters for a long time, but you never really know. So get out there and see it, see what you think, experience it, don't sit too far back in the theater. I would recommend sit midway or up closer, really, really let that screen loom over you, surrender yourself to this vision, come back, let us know what you think in the comments or send us an email. I like you, I'm going to go back. I'm going to go see it this weekend. I'm going to go with my wife. I want her to see it. I want to get her take on a couple of the questions I have about it. This is going to be a fun one to see again.
Yeah, I'm the same. Yeah, I think that's, you brought up a great point. It's just like seeing it because you are almost the ghost, it's putting you in that person. And look, this isn't the first time there's been a first person POV movie by any means, but like there's just something a little bit more special and thoughtful about this one. And when you all do see it, and I'm trusting that you will, please do, make sure that you, like Keir says, drop us that comment. If you're watching us on YouTube, comments are right below. Send us an email to filmographerspodcast@gmail.com. Hit the like button, give us a rating, give us a review, give us a subscribe, do all those small, tiny things that add up to a lot. And that we just have fun with. We just have fun commenting and talking and going back and forth. We love it. So that's what we're here for.
Yes. Thank you in advance for that. And huge thanks, as always, to Kevin Lau, our producer, Gompson, who composed and played our theme music, and Cosmo Graff, who designed our logo.
Join us next time on The Filmographers as we continue our journey through Soderbergh's filmography. Keir, we are rounding third here.
So close.
So close. We are getting there because we are up to 2022, and we're going to be talking about Soderbergh's techie Hitchcockian thriller, Kimi. We also, at the same time, speaking of Hitchcock, we dig into our favorite Hitchcock movies that were not directed by Hitchcock.
See you then.